Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the second episode of season 2. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're not, welcome back to another amazing episode where I interview Ilana, an architect devoted to the field of sustainability. We talk about many different things, ranging from our education to ways that we can contribute to our planet. If you haven't already, go listen to the last episode where I talked to an actress. After listening to this episode, it would be awesome if you could head down to Spotify or YouTube and hit that like, subscribe, review button, all of those things. Also, check out our website, which is linked in the description box below, for free resources and blog posts, as well as our Instagram page at the Everything.teen podcast, where you'll find a bunch of other interesting things. The fact of the week is that for 20 years, a cat named Stubbs was mayor of a small Alaskan town. Without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Hi, Ilana. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Lara. How are you?
I'm good. So I wanted to start off by asking you, what other jobs did you want to have when you were younger, and what kind of led you to finally choose architecture?
Well, I really only had one other job when I was very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old. I had this idea that I wanted to be a brain surgeon because it was like the hardest thing that you could be. I was trying to think, what's the most challenging thing? And then my father, he worked for a pharmaceutical company, and he was pretty excited about the fact that I wanted to be a brain surgeon. So he started bringing home these movies of surgery. And I watched one and I was like, oh no, I don't like to look at blood. I'm squeamish about blood. So I decided that I didn't want to be a brain surgeon as soon as I saw those. But architecture, probably when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I always was very sensitive to the space, the surroundings. And we also used to get this newspaper called the New York Times, and they had a magazine in the back, like a magazine, and they had all sorts of real estate ads for apartments and houses, and they would show plans and drawings. And then I used to trace over those plans, and then I used to start making my own plans. And, just like always felt like I was interested in space and my surroundings. And from there, I decided that I wanted to be an architect.
Great. And before going to university, what was the main goal you want to achieve in your future as an architect, if you had it, any?
I didn't really have an idea of what my goal was. I wanted to design buildings and spaces, and, um, I didn't really think about a specific goal. I wanted to be able to do that. And my goal was to become an architect. And that takes a long time anyway. So it's a pretty significant goal in
Mm-hmm.
and of itself.
Mm-hmm. What do you specialize in?
Well, for many years, I practiced, working on the design of buildings, both, as a designer, managing projects, organizing teams, working with clients, all of the things that are involved in being an architect. But then, about 9 or 10 years, into when I was practicing, I decided I wanted to specialize in buildings that were more environmentally responsible, that had a less negative impact on the planet. So I decided to focus on sustainable architecture.
Great. And was it because of the ongoing climate crisis, or is it just something you got interested in?
Well, I knew that when I started out in architecture, people can specialize in different things.
Mm-hmm.
And, about 7 or 8 years after doing lots of different things, I started to realize, oh, I'd like to focus on something specific. I didn't know what, because I was pretty good at everything. I wasn't like excellent at one specific thing. But the family I was brought up in, rather, was very focused on, environmental values. My father, and so when I was growing up, we were very focused on improving the environment. So I actually came across a book. In an architecture bookstore that talked about sustainable architecture. When I saw the book, I was like, "Oh, this is exactly what I want to do." So.
Great. And can you talk to us a bit about your education?
Sure. I, in high school, made sure that I studied a lot of math and science. I took drafting, which I loved in high school. It was like my favorite subject.
Can
I
you explain a bit what that is?
Drafting, well, basically, I took it actually in grade seven. Well, basically, you learn how to draw with instruments like rulers, special pens, and pencils, and you do what's called measured drawing. So, meaning that, let's say you're drawing a plan of a house,
Mhm.
you're drawing it what we call to scale. It's in proportion to the actual size. So, let's say, you know, something in real life, a room would be 10 feet by 10 feet. You would draw it in a smaller scale, but it would be the same proportions.
Yeah.
So we learned how to do measured drawings using instruments, and so it was really, really fun. But then I guess after that, I went on to architecture school. Yeah, so I went to McGill University and I went to architecture school there. And we learned all sorts of things. And then I worked for many years, and then I decided to go back to school after I started specializing in sustainable architecture to learn more about that. So I went and did a master's degree that focused on climate change and how to adapt buildings to climate change. And I did that at the University of British Columbia. But that was many years after I started working, I decided to go back to school.
Great. And was it just to be able to specialize in one thing and focus on one particular thing?
Yeah, it was again to further specialize. So
Hmm.
I had specialized in sustainable architecture, and then as the climate is changing, and we're seeing more and more climate events like floods, like more heat, like forest fires, I wanted to learn more about how we can think about designing buildings to adapt to the future climate and to be what we call more resilient, so more resistant to some of these changes or these potential uh, climate hazards, we call them. If there's a flood, how do you make sure
Hmm.
your building is protected? So yeah, even within the field of sustainable architecture, I specialized even further in my master's degree.
Great. And then you started a company, right? And can you talk to us more about that kind of business?
Sure. So when I finished my master's degree, I had some interest from different people who they wanted my help. So I hadn't planned to start a company. I thought I would you know look for another job,
Hmm.
and because of the pandemic, it was a little bit more challenging to figure out, oh, where am I going to move? And I had um, some different requests for help, so I thought, okay, well, I can just do these contracts, but I'm going to start a company, register a business. So what I did is I came up with a name, and then I hired a graphic designer to do a logo for me, which was really fun. And the government where I live in any place has a registry, and you have to make sure that someone else isn't using the same name. And then you pay some money, you register a business, and all of that for taxes. And then I started to do work for different clients under my company name.
Awesome. And before that, what different jobs have you had in architecture?
Oh yeah, so I've worked in many different companies. I've worked in I guess everything from a very small architecture firm just with 5 people, where I worked as a
Hmm.
designer. I've worked for an interior design firm that specialized just in interiors. And then I worked at, a little bit bigger, like 60, 65 people, where I was a project architect. So I would run bigger projects with a bigger team and be more involved in working with the client, making sure that I was communicating and coordinating, the different people on the team who are working on different projects. So those types of projects were things like hospitals, libraries, bigger, what we call institutional projects.
Hmm.
And I've worked on projects, ranging from office spaces, houses, stores, and then some of those institutional buildings like schools and hospitals and libraries. And then after, when I decided to specialize in sustainable architecture, I became the director of sustainability at an even larger architecture firm of about something around 150 people, where I basically, helped uh, all sorts of projects across the whole office uh, to have them be more focused on being environmentally responsible.
And do you prefer working in like small firms or really big companies, or does it depend on the team and the business itself?
Yeah, I it depends. It really, well, I think what's important in a small company, what's really important is you make sure you get along really well with everybody
Hmm.
in a small company, because it's almost like a family. Like
Yeah,
if you're a five-person office, you really you have to make sure that um uh that you really have a good relationship with everybody. And one thing about a small office is that you get to do everything. So when you're starting out in your career, it's great because you have to do everything from almost like tech support to
yeah,
answering the phone to even accounting or things like that. And even in that company, my boss, he would have to clean the bathroom a little bit, even, and he was the owner of the
yeah,
company. A big company is great because you can specialize, but you want to make sure that, some people in a big company, they get sort of what we call pigeonholed or stuck doing something they don't like. So if you're doing something you really like I was doing sustainability, it was fantastic. And what's great about a big company is that you get all kinds of support. There's an accountant, there's somebody who is going to clean the kitchen, there's somebody who's going to, you have one little problem with a computer, you just send them an email and in 5 minutes they're at your desk
yeah.
fixing it. So I think there's benefits to both, and also downsides to both.
Thank you. And what's your favorite part of being an architect?
Oh, that's really tough. Well, I'm going to answer this with maybe I'm cheating on the answer, but my favorite part of being an architect is the variety.
Hmm.
You get to do so many different things. You get to design and draw. You get to meet with clients. You get to do calculations. You get to, you know, um, coordinate and work with people and come up with ideas together. Um, you get to go on construction sites and work with builders. So there's so much variety. So I'd say my favorite thing is the variety.
What do you think is the next step in sustainable architecture?
Well, I think that, we've learned how to make buildings very energy efficient. There are even buildings now that use no more energy than they produce through like solar panels on the roof or wind energy. And they're very well insulated and very efficient. And we've learned how to use materials that are more sustainable, that are less, doing less harm or creating less harm when they're extracted. But I think that the biggest movement now in sustainable architecture is to change the vision of how people live.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people, over the past few generations, people's houses have gotten bigger and bigger, and they have more space, they have more cars, um, they're consuming more. And so I think as architects, we have to create a vision of how people can live in maybe places that are not as big, but they have more access to exciting things. They can walk, they don't have to drive, they have parks near them. And so they don't need such a big house. They can enjoy lots of things in their
Yeah.
neighborhood. So I think the bigger picture of how we envision our environment is going to be the most important thing.
And how do you think we're going to get there if people are just, they have this habit where they're just buying and buying and buying, and it's just going upwards, and every year there's more or consuming more and more?
Well, I think, what we experienced during COVID about having to be closer and more at home and maybe enjoying our neighborhoods a little bit, and not, going all over the place, and appreciating things like, you know, um, other than buying things like cooking, enjoying time with our families, going for walks. Um, and so I think we have to put more emphasis on some of the quality of life, instead of the material, what I call the material things of buying, 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 like things that improve our quality of life, that give us more time to enjoy the things we really like in life, like nature, like
Mhm.
friends and family. So it's a tough thing to do because, there's so much advertising out there to
Yeah.
consume, but
It,
I
it's
think
quite overwhelming.
it's overwhelming, and especially with media and social media, but trying to place more value on those things and realizing that those are really what most people appreciate the most if you really think about it.
Yeah, that's very well said. And do you have any tips for having a more eco-friendly home? If you're a teen and your parents own a house, and um, or even if you're an adult listening to this, like, do you have any tips for that?
Sure. Well, I think the basic thing, well, I'll start from very basic things, is that if you're in your house and there are certain spaces you're not using throughout the day, like, let's say your bedroom, let's say,
Yeah,
you sleep there, turn down the thermostat, turn off the lights, close the door, those types of things, very basic. You're going to save energy. Your bills are going to go down, those types of things. um, and then if you want to do anything kind of on the next level would be like your cleaning products. So we spend, most people, and this is before the pandemic even,
yeah,
spend over 90% of their time indoors. And in many places, of course, some parts of the world, the air quality outside is very bad. But in most cases, the quality of the air indoors is worse than the quality of the air outdoors. And so, what contributes to that air quality that's not good? Things like cleaning products that aren't eco friendly. So, trying to use more natural cleaning products, making sure that materials that, whether it's furniture or things that you buy, don't off gas. You get that smell sometimes when
yeah.
you buy new things that can contribute to bad air quality. um, making sure that you open the windows once in a while, getting fresh air in. And then I would say, if you want to take that to an even higher level, you can do very simple things to make your home more energy efficient. For example, there's sometimes lots of draft. You feel like something is cold, and or you feel a little air coming in around the windows. And sometimes you can just buy something called caulking or sealant. Doesn't cost very much money, and you can go around and do a test. With a little feather or with something, and feel where the air is coming in, and just seal those areas, and that will make an amazing difference. Will make you more comfortable at home, and also will save energy.
Great. And yeah, I think that it's mostly in the habits, right? Because when Greta Thunberg was giving all her speeches, we were all like really motivated to make a change and to do something. And all of us were super eco-friendly and very aware. But then that kind of wore off. The next day people were driving their cars again, right? And like it's like it never happened, and it's because you can't you couldn't keep that up, right?
Right.
So I feel like making small little changes and keeping those changes instead of like once in a while having like a big march, or like saying I'm going to do this, like I don't think it's going to be very productive in the end of the day. So yeah, really doing those things that you mentioned.
Yeah,
um
like recycling,
yeah.
doing your composting. If you can eat a little bit less meat,
Hmm.
all of these little things, and like you said, Lara, one habit at a time. Because as I think in one of your
Yeah.
previous podcasts, once you start doing something for a while, it just becomes a habit, and you don't think about it, and then you can start the next thing,
Yeah, like
right?
recycling. Like
Right.
50 years ago, people were like recycling, like how I'm just gonna put everything in the garbage, right? But now it's something that's ingrained in our brains.
Right.
And I want to ask you a few last questions. So, what advice would you give to a teen that wants to be an architect in the future?
Well, I think the most important thing is to be really interested in architecture as a starting point. It's not an easy profession. you work a lot of long hours. You have to study for a really long time, and then even after you study, you have to do an apprenticeship, and then you have to take exams, and you have to pay fees every year. So it's a lot of work. So you have to feel like it's your destiny, like it's that you're
Yeah.
passionate about it. And it's not just like, oh, I'm interested, I like buildings. You have to feel it inside of you, I think, like I did. Like I just
Mm-hmm.
felt like it was, I dream about space, I think about it, I notice it. So, and maybe you don't know that right away, but I think you should tune into that. I would say draw a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be a math genius to do architecture, but if you like to measure, if you like geometry, that's always helpful. But draw a lot, paint a lot, do a lot of art, look at buildings, try to visit places where you see buildings, do lots of sketches. And if you like to make models or build things, whether it's with Lego or just making things on your own, like I used to build furniture when I was younger. I loved building things. So anything that kind of gets you thinking, like as a builder or as somebody who draws, I think that's the most important thing. And it's a lot of fun too. If
Mm-hmm.
and don't be intimidated if you think you're not good at it, because I was really not good at drawing, and I just learned, over time.
Great. And finally, what advice would you give to teens in general?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think, you know, just don't worry about finding at this point in time. Like, I was kind of fortunate that I had this idea when I was very young, that that's what I wanted to do. But a lot of people don't know what they want to do when they're young. So I think what's important is to tune into the things that really you enjoy doing. And,
Mm-hmm.
I don't just mean like I enjoy watching TV or looking at my phone, but activities like whether it's certain subjects in school or even outside of school, or things you like to read about or things you like to do, and tune into like how those things make you feel, and explore them, and don't worry, oh, I don't know exactly what I want to do, but take classes that things that interest you, and then you'll find your way.
Okay, so on that note, thank you so much for being on this podcast, and I'm sure our audience has learned a ton today. And hopefully, you'll come on another season.
It was my pleasure, Lara. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Email me at theeverythingteenpodcast@gmail.com if you have any thoughts, comments, or business inquiries. Don't forget to leave that review on Spotify to support the pod, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube to get notified for new episodes. And don't forget about the podcast's Instagram account at theeverything.teenpodcast. And also, a big announcement, we're almost at 1,000 downloads, so please share with your friends so we can get to that. And thank you just so much for the support. And if you like what you heard, stay tuned for the next episode where I talk to another person about their career. See you soon.